Well, good evening, freedom fighters and Alberta patriots. Thanks for joining us with another issue of Honest and Live with Paul Hinman. We have a couple of interesting subjects tonight. I know we're going to talk about policing, but because of the news today that happened and the Premier removed one UCP MLA from caucus, I want to talk a little bit about that before we get into policing tonight. I found it quite interesting back when the Premier was campaigning and I was pushing hard, and many people were talking about the importance of recall and that the MLA should be accountable to their constituents. And I remember the Premier, he seemed to be more, what would I say, engaged in believing that floor crossers were a terrible and bad thing, and that just shouldn't happen. We had other leaders who said that they were going to make people pay $15,000 to cross the floor. And I found it kind of interesting today that the Premier won't allow the people in Lesser Slave Lake to have an option of recalling their MLA, but he says that that person isn't fit to sit as a UCP MLA and has kicked them out. And yet when he was doing his arguments about floor crossing, he says, look, when a constituent votes for a party, they more often are voting for the leader and that party that they're voting for than they are for the individual. And for Jason to say today that this member hasn't been representing the constituency well and he's kicked them out of caucus, those people now have no voice inside the government where they actually elected a person. And I believe Premier Kenney is absolutely wrong about this. What he should have done, a year and a half ago was pass legislation on recall, and then he would have got up and said, we have a process of accountability here, and we will respect the wishes of the constituents of Lesser Slave Lake. But no, he's taken this attitude that he knows best, and to me, all he's doing is cleaning up his caucus and someone that he thinks is embarrassing and shouldn't be part of their caucus, but yet he won't allow that decision to go to the people of Lesser Slave Lake. And so once again, I believe the Premier's on the wrong side of freedom, on the wrong side of democracy, and running autocracy and deciding what he thinks is best for those people. So very disappointed with the move. I do hope that the Premier will do the right thing and actually announce that all UCP MLAs, including himself, would honor a recall petition, and they will, as quick as possible, pass recall legislation so that we can hold not only this government, but any government to task when in fact they're not in line with the people. And again, I'll put it out that I would certainly urge any UCP MLA that knows these lockdowns are doing more harm than good, that they shouldn't be province-wide, that they should be focused where they're needed, to join the member from Lesser Slave Lake and sit as an independent until the lockdowns are removed and there's been legislation for accountability through recall passed. But anyways, just had to get that off my chest tonight. Very upset that the Premier would do this to the people of Lesser Slave Lake and somehow think that it's in the best interest of democracy. But it's just getting scary. I think I've been now to five freedom rallies that are opposed to these province-wide lockdowns and the attitude that the government is taking. But there's a bigger problem than just the dictates and these restrictions that are being put on us, and especially in light of the Christmas holidayers, the jet setters, that we couldn't get together with our own children that might just live down the block from us, or our grandchildren, but yet it was okay for them to fly to Hawaii or Mexico or other places, and there it's okay to get together with your family. And the hypocrisy has truly run deep and angered many Albertans, including myself. But what's even more troubling is that we're turning into a police state. And as I've been to these different rallies, every time the police have been there, they've been there with their cameras, they've been taking pictures. And the last rally I went to here in Lethbridge, I haven't verified this, but I was told today that the organizer actually received a ticket. And this is appalling to me. And the police actions that are being taken are disgusting, I think. They're not looking out and protecting the people. They're protecting politicians, and they're forcing compliance through intimidation and through fines. And this is just wrong. And so tonight I've got a good friend that's going to join us and talk about these police actions, and he's done some research on what we as Albertans could possibly do in some of these small towns that are not having problems with COVID and would like their businesses to be able to be opened. We'll talk a little bit about Premier Klein's niece, who had her business shut down, and the RCM piece showing up in Innisfail, and a few of these other subjects. But Dave, do you want to let Paul Mitchell on here, and we'll start the discussion? And Paul, you kind of had an intro that you wanted to talk about, I think, about the police situation. Go ahead and spill your beans.
Yes, everybody saw the clip of the police arresting that unfortunate young Albertan who was just out trying to play hockey, and I think that was, you know, sort of a first example where people were really shocked by what they saw. But more and more, it seems like almost every day we're now seeing right across Canada quite a variety of outrageous police activity. And so even just today alone, I've had 3 or 4 of these stories that I've seen. And I thought before we talk about some solutions, maybe not everyone is exactly familiar with what's going on. So maybe we can review a couple of these recent issues, and then we'll talk about it and maybe go for some solutions. How about that?
Sounds good. And I want to start off with, though, with that picture of Anne Frank and the situation that she was in, and those people. But the people who hid Anne Frank were breaking the law. The people who killed her were following it. And the important thing here is that the law is not a moral compass. And these police officers, I empathize with them in the fact that they're being told by their superiors on what they need to do. But this is really coming down for me as an Albertan, that are we doing any harm? Are we causing, problems? And as Paul Mitchell says, those young individuals that were playing hockey on an open rink, they were not hurting anybody. I couldn't think of a more wholesome activity that they could or should be doing than that. And yet when you watch that video, it just, I'm sorry, it sends shivers down my spine to think that that's the way we're treating Canadians, Albertans, Calgarians. And Paul Mitchell has got some other situations that Dave is going to show up that's happening across the province. But again, as I said, what really disturbed me at these 5 freedom rallies that I've gone to is the police presence, the police tickets. I mean, I think I showed last week, maybe I didn't, but the $1,200 ticket that one lady received as she was showing up there, and it's just appalling, and it's wrong. But with that, Paul Mitchell, do you want to talk about some of the cases that you've been following?
Well, yeah, absolutely, Paul. So I've been in contact with a lot of local people around where I live, and more they're concerned that if they go out or they do something, they could receive a fine or even be arrested. There's businesses, of course, that are afraid to open their business, and many of them are dangling on a little bit of a string here, where they're close to the edge of insolvency now due to what's going on. And instead of worrying about saving themselves, now they're terrified of the police. And so maybe David can throw up that first story from today, and we'll see what's happening in various parts of the country and why everyone is now very, very concerned. So this happened in Quebec, where they've got a 8 p.m. curfew, and as you can read, a family got a $3,100 ticket. They were driving home, but they had been taking care of a 77-year-old relative who didn't have anyone else to take care of them. And their reward for looking after their relative was this outrageous ticket. And you can see from this example that it's just so outrageous that if a police person had done this in years past, all of Canada would have been absolutely outraged, and this person would be gone. But But now that seems to be a normal everyday situation.
It,
So
it yeah, it is, and it's appalling as we look at that, like just the fact that there's this lockdown curfew, and here's a a very viable situation, looking after loved ones that need the help, and yet you're doing that. And again, this this overwhelming desire of our premier and our health officials to have compliance, and thinking that higher fines and stiffer laws and up to a year in jail is going to do this is just destroying people. And especially, as Paul was saying, that these individuals, many of them are on the brink of losing their businesses, their families breaking down, that there's just so much stress and anxiety along with the economic impact. And yet we're falling into this police state that, again, we're going to keep showing over and over again.
and before we move on, the whole premise is that we're supposed to be protecting the seniors from COVID, and yet here's this family. They're taking care of a senior that's one of their relatives, and of course they're being punished for it. So it's absolutely hypocritical, and it puts a lie to the whole narrative. So go ahead and throw up the second story today.
Well, I just want to make one more comment there on that, because what's so critical here is the fact that those people were looking after a senior that needed it. And again, the law was saying what they were doing was wrong. And the point that I want to keep emphasizing, and I think Paul Mitchell does as well, is that the law isn't a moral guide, nor is it necessarily right. And enforcing that law is wrong. It's so many times, and we as Albertans need to stand up and say, no, this is wrong and we won't accept it. And there's got to be strength in numbers. But let's go with the next one now.
So this next one, I think police are riling the wrong crowd when they're going after the mother bears, because we have this mother, and she this is in Ontario today, and she dropped off her child so she could do some shopping, and of course the police went after her for that. And it, it goes to show that, normal everyday activities, she doesn't want her child to be out in public where of course we're told we're not supposed to be, and she wants to leave it with her parents, with the child's grandparents, and the police are cracking down on this. So it seems like there's almost no limit to the idiocy of some of these laws that are being enforced. And I am absolutely dumbfounded that the police are not using discretion in cases like this. It's ludicrous that you would charge somebody for dropping off their child at the grandparents' place.
Yep, and I've got a comment on that one as well. That a friend of a friend was in shopping at Costco with her 4 little children, which is quite a task for a mother. And so I can see the benefit, and the need often, especially with all of the problems, not to touch things and to try and get little kids to wear their masks. Anyways, this mother was in there. She has some medical conditions, but long story short, as she was going through the store, she kept realizing that this lady was following her, and again, like for me, when I talk, my mask pulls down, so you got to readjust it when you're in there. And she was talking to her kids and trying to control them and everything else. She finished all of her shopping and pushed her cart up, and the Costco employee came along and says, ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave. And she says, excuse me? She says, we're going to have to ask you to leave. And says that, yeah, as soon as I finish paying for these groceries and stuff, I'll leave. She says, no, we're going to ask you to leave now. You don't get to purchase anything. And she had to take her 4 kids and leave. And she says, well, like, what's the problem? What are you doing? You haven't been wearing your mask properly, and we've seen you playing with it and fiddling with it while you were in the store. Costco's a private business, and you have to pay a membership to be there, so they have special privileges. But the insanity that's being pushed onto retailers and those that are open and stuff is just unbelievable. There's no reasonable thought or anything else in there. And like this case is, here's a daughter dropping off her children with her grandparents. to try and make things better. And again, on the wrong side of the law. Doesn't mean that the law is right and should be that compliance is there. But it's just astounding to me when you look at these cases. Like, are you serious? What professional policeman or store employee would enforce these laws? But yet we're seeing them over and over again.
Yeah, they're trying to call it the new normal, but there's nothing normal about it. So this third case, you can put up the still first, David. Thanks. So this is I guess the worst of the lot, and this happened today in Guelph, and a senior citizen was actually pummeled at his house by police, and he received multiple blows to the face, and it's really pretty crazy. So before we talk about it, David, if you could just roll the video and then we'll talk.
Look at what the officer is doing to this man. Look at what he's doing. Look at what he's doing. Look at what he's doing.
Stop resisting! Stop resisting!
Look at what these cops are doing.
Fucking paper!
They punched this man. This officer, Herbshesh, was kneeing him in the head.
Stop
They're breaking his balcony.
Okay. Where do you want me to leave then?
This is an old, frail man that they're doing this to.
Stop resisting!
Look at what they're doing to him.
Stop resisting! Oh, fuck! Put your hand behind your back! Oh,
Look at what they're doing to him.
fuck! Put your hand...
This. Look at what the officer is doing.
So it's absolutely gotten to the level of insanity. We're supposed to be protecting our seniors, and yet police are showing up at their homes and pummeling them. So it's no wonder that people in my community, and I guess communities across Alberta and right across Canada, people are scared of the police now. They're not only worried about fines, but are the police going to show up at your house or at your business? And who knows where that will lead? And this is where we're at now. And so a lot of people are thinking a little bit forward, and they're imagining, if it's gotten this bad in the last few months, where might we be a few months from now? What rights will we still have, if any? And are we going to, at that point, be in a complete police state? So before I talk about some solutions, maybe you want to have a comment on that outrageous video, Paul?
I do. And again, so many of I guess I want to say the lockdown advocates, this is what they're pushing to. And again, if you go back 6 months, the World Health Organization was actually talking about herd immunity and how when that herd immunity is reached, how that will actually protect these seniors. And yet by not allowing people to go out, allowing the working well to be there, where 99% of the people aren't going to get hurt and build up that immunity, they continue to keep us in a lockdown state, which keeps us perpetually below that herd immunity and not able to reach that threshold. But again, I don't think enough people are realizing the police brutality and what's going on here, and police are being told that compliance is necessary. Can you imagine if we were to go back to when they first said to wear seat belts, or they first said to put on helmets, and they pulled people over and started pummeling them and arresting them and saying that you're a danger to society? These individuals are not a threat to society. They're trying to make ends meet in a lockdown situation that shouldn't be existing. And again, it's just appalling, it's disgusting, and it's wrong. And to me, we as Alberta freedom fighters and patriots, we need to start standing up and showing up in numbers. And I totally understand people are afraid to go out. The rallies, they're continuing to intimidate. There's fewer and fewer people going out, but you just need to look at what's happening at other places. And like the virus, it's going to come here if we don't stop it. And we need to speak out. We need to denounce this type of activity, and this idea of compliance is wrong. But we're going to go over some more. So let's show another one.
Well, what I'd like to say here is, of course, regardless of your position on the seriousness of COVID-19, I personally think every single day Dina Hinshaw and Jason Kenney overstate the case, because they're ignoring the fact that there's so many false positives that are resulting from the PCR testing, and that a huge majority of people are not seriously at risk. But even if you believe everything that Henshaw says about the seriousness of the virus, is this the kind of society that you want to live in? Do you want to have a situation where anytime you have an encounter with the police, that you are under threat of extreme abuse, or receiving fines that are completely out of proportion to the situation, where you can be in a completely innocuous situation where you weren't even aware you were doing anything wrong, and yet the punishment is going to be extremely severe. You could be snitched out by one of the other people in your community. They're actually recommending this. They have a snitch line. There can not only be the $1,000 and $1,200 fines, but they say right on the government website that they can prosecute you for up to $100,000. And that's here in Alberta, for example. So if I were, for example, to meet up with my neighbor or a single friend, even though that could be the most innocent situation, the penalties that are out there are absolutely ridiculous, and the fact that they're cracking down and really enforcing these things, well, people are terrified, Paul.
Yeah, and again, the sad thing is like, even if someone was having, heart or chest pains or something else, that they're afraid to call out and have anybody else come to help them, a neighbor and things. I mean, people are suffering adverse health effects because they're fearful to go out and to reach out for health and for help. But probably the other thing that's most concerning to me is the, I don't know, the sensationalization that they're doing with these cases, and saying that, our healthcare system's under threat. What will they do if we actually get a virus that is dangerous? When you see what the response is on what is proving very much to be very close to a normal flu season, and this is the response, the new normal response, and again, the immediate escalation from what they say is compliance to resisting arrest, and therefore they get to use this force and pillage somebody and to twist their arms and put their knee in their back and slam their head against the ground because they say they were resisting arrest because they were failing for compliance. It's escalated beyond my belief to see where it's at, and it's just wrong, and we need to make more people aware of this. And again, to go back to what you were saying, is that we totally respect anybody who wants to self-isolate and feels they're at risk, but they can't keep punishing the working well or have province-wide lockdowns and think that this isn't causing more harm than the virus.
Well, one of the very clear harms came out today. There was a report, I think I saw it on CTV, but it was 22% of Canadians are now, according to this report, clinically depressed. So it could be because they're locked in their homes, or they've lost their job, they're losing their business. Of course, many families are breaking down because of the stress of this. And so it seems like the government has finally found something they're good at. Unfortunately, what they're good at is destroying the mental health of Canadians. And these police activities are, of course, just going to exacerbate that problem to an even higher level. And I don't know what the government thinks that they're trying to do here. People are delaying screening for cancer, for heart disease. So we're going to be having all kinds of serious medical conditions that are going to spring out of this. And what's happening to our kids? This is child abuse as far as I'm concerned. We are going to have a generation of kids that are going to grow up. They're being seen as disease vectors rather than as children. They're not going to be playing with their friends. They're not going to socialize. They're going to not only be afraid of diseases, but perhaps, that they could kill one of their grandparents. And this is
Paul, I've got to stop you there for a minute because this is a real factor. I have a friend whose 9-year-old grandson, when he goes to visit him, he's traumatized. He'll cry. He thinks that he either one is going to kill his grandfather, or two, the police are going to come in and then arrest them. And this is real. Like I know people that their family are going through this, and it's unbelievable. But sorry to interrupt you on that, but I just had to say that about, I know a personal case where a 9-year-old grandson is not able to sleep. He's nervous. And again, not only the depression of the parents and other ones, these children are traumatized. And when and how will they get over that?
Yeah, I've heard lots of stories where, kids that were previously well-adjusted, happy kids, lots of friends, now they don't even want to see people anymore. They just want to sit in front of the computer and be in their own little world. And these are people that were, or little kids that were well-adjusted. So you can imagine children that were more troubled, or that had problems in their lives, or perhaps are not in a home where they're receiving as much attention from their parents. The results could be absolutely devastating. So here in my town, and I suspect in probably every town across Alberta, people are trying to think, is there something that we can do that will help out on this situation? Is there some way that regardless of what Dina Hinshaw and Jason Kenney think, that can we create a safer environment, an environment where people are not terrified that they're going to be arrested just for being out, or if they go into a store, or if they meet with a friend. And so being under lockdown, I got a little bored one day not too long ago, and I decided that was something worth looking into. So what I did, I want to know, of course, here I'm in a small town, and the RCMP are in charge of policing here, and of course they get their marching orders straight from Ottawa, and so you can imagine that they're going to be told that compliance is at a premium. But is there something that my town could do about this? So according to the Police Act of Alberta, so very surprisingly, it was written back in a time when the laws were not so authoritarian. It turns out that every town or even village of more than 5,000 people, they can take over policing for themselves. If the local RCMP are not going to cooperate, all they have to do is they would form a police commission between 3 and 12 people. Obviously, in my town, we only have a little over 5,000 people, so it would probably be 3 or 4 people, and one of those people would be in charge of taking complaints from the public. And at that point, my town could appoint a police chief and police officers, and the police chief and the officers would be responsible to listen to what our local police commission says about how things should be policed. And a lot of people have been upset with the RCMP in Alberta for a long time, and we keep waiting for someone like Jason Kenney to get rid of them. But it turns out that if some of the towns around Alberta are not only fed up with the RCMP, but want to create that type of environment in their town, more of a safe haven where the police protect and serve the citizens as opposed to acting as the hammer for the government, this is something that can be done. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be reaching out to my local mayor and to the town councillors, and I think if we can get enough of the local people here to apply some pressure. Remember, there's municipal elections coming up in Alberta this October. There might be a lot of very reasonable mayors and town councillors across Alberta who will take things in hand and, first of all, talk to the RCMP and just tell them this is not the type of policing that we want in our communities. And if they won't listen, well, then some of our towns are just going to have to give the RCMP the heave-ho.
Yep, excellent point there. And again, I think that even in the smaller towns in rural Alberta, and Paul Mitchell was talking about those that are 5,000 citizens and over, but even the smaller towns, the RCMP come in to council and give a report on their activities and where they're going and ask the concerns of council. And I think the most important thing here, and as Paul Mitchell has said, this is an election year for these individuals. This is the year where their ears actually open more and their mouths close as they're listening to the people and what they come forward with. And so, especially if you live in rural Alberta and part of a small town, you need to talk to your councillors and your mayors and let them know that we do not want this freedom taken away from us. We want our children to be able to go out and to play and to be able to sing and to be able to participate in sports and to go to school and do the things that we normally did in the normal flu season. I mean, there's been no question that children are the safest with this flu. COVID-19 does not affect young children as bad as influenza A and B in the normal flu in a flu season. And so the critical thing here is to actually get out, speak with your elected representatives and ask them where they're standing on this lockdown. And number two, where they've instructed their local police, RCMP, their sheriffs, their peace officers, and what they're telling them to do. Because at the very most, to me, where it should be is in the level of education. There should be no fines. There should be no tickets. It's fine to go and talk to people and say, look, we need you to, you can't be together here. There's too many here, and to educate. But this idea of compliance and then resisting arrest is unacceptable here and needs to be stopped, in my opinion.
Yeah, and let's face facts. Calgary and Edmonton have pretty unique mayors with
Cool.
Nancy and Don Iveson. I don't think that they really would fit in any small town in Alberta, that is for sure. And so in my town and the rest of the towns in Alberta, we did not elect any crazy leftists for our mayors. And so a lot of the mayors and town councillors, they're like us. They are more conservative oriented, traditional Albertans. And I think a lot of them, if you just present the case, they may well be extremely amenable to doing this. Just because I read the Police Act of Alberta, I might have been the first person in quite a while to actually read that. It's not something that a normal person does on a normal day in their activities. And so it's very, very possible that these town councillors and mayors don't have the slightest clue that this is within their purview, that this is within their powers. And so that's what we're gonna do, is we're gonna try and educate them and see if we can bring them on side. And that would be an excellent solution to the problem, at least on our local levels.
Yeah, I think that the two things to me that we need to do as citizens, and again, I guess I'm going to backstep here a bit. I'm amazed at the number of people who say it's our civic duty, you know, that we need to make the sacrifices and stay home and not be there. And I want to say, no, we need to do the sacrifice of standing up and speaking out for our society, not following the compliance and these immoral laws that they're imposing on us. And you need to get out and support these rallies if you're able to. And I realize that for many people, the risk isn't worth it. But those of you that have the courage and the tenacity and the ability to go and support these rallies, we just need to do it. Even if it's driving around and honking the horn and standing up. But there's just, I can't emphasize enough with the municipal elections going on talking to your councillors and your mayors and saying this is unacceptable. You can't be doing this to our citizens here and think that this is the good of society and this is for a benefit. When you think back and look at those pictures, it's just crazy. But David, I don't know, do you want to put up that one picture of compliance and the masses bowing down to the leader's wishes here, and we'll have a thought on this, but here we are at the top, you know, COVID's coming in and they crack the whip and says everybody's got to isolate, and there's one person who refuses, and then a group refuses. And I'm sorry, but if we don't get to that bottom frame where we stand up and say enough and no more, it's going to remain at that second frame where we're going to get hurt to the point where the damage is just irreparable for many of our young children. But thanks, David, for putting that up. And
yeah, there was I guess we were asked to comment on solutions, and I think we have been talking about that a bit, but I want to expand a little bit. In my town, the town council has, and it used to meet in, of course, in open in the council chambers, and people could go, but of course, due to COVID, it's switched over to Zoom, as many things have. So realistically, you could, and I'm sure a lot of these councillors are used to having Zoom council meetings now where it's just the councillors, the mayor, and maybe one or two other people. But if in their next Zoom meeting, at their council meetings, in my town, it's every 2 weeks that they have a council meeting. If there was 50 or 100 or more than 100 people from the community that just check in from their computer and start laying down the law with these people, they are going to pay attention to that. It will not take very many Zoom meetings before they realize that the tide has turned. And politicians, anytime there's a big parade, they'll want to lead it. And so if they see that there's a big parade lining up against these lockdowns and aggressive policing, then that's the side they'll be on. I think right now they're probably hearing a lot of people complaining about, because they're scared of COVID, that they want more lockdown. So perhaps they, at the moment, think that might be a majority position. But if you're watching tonight and you've got some friends and you've got some family, well, maybe you guys should organize a little bit of an event to give a surprise to your town council the next time they have one of their meetings. And if the word gets out that this can be done, at a bare minimum, we're going to move the needle in the right direction. And at the maximum, it may well be that at least in rural Alberta, outside of Calgary and Edmonton, this could be a game changer in a short period of time.
Yep, no, excellent points. And again, I want to go back to the last rally I was in Lethbridge this, was that Monday? Lose track during the week. I think it was Monday, Tuesday, maybe it was Tuesday. But it just, I can't emphasize enough the importance of speaking up. And David, if you want to put up that quote by Edmund Burke, we can discuss this a little bit, that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. Okay, thanks, David. That if we don't do anything and start speaking out, we know where we're going to end up. And again, I've heard from pretty good sources that once again, the lockdown individuals have been more outspoken and sending more messages to our elected representatives, and that's who they're hearing. And again, I totally understand if people are afraid to go out and get ticketed and not be in compliance. But what you can do is, Paul Mitchell says, you can get on those Zoom meetings, say you want to be there, but you can overwhelm them with phone calls and emails and letters and saying that this is wrong, you're hurting people, you're hurting lives, you're hurting families, and this province-wide lockdown is wrong. And if enough letters come in and enough phone calls come in, I can guarantee you these elected people will switch their stance. But right now, they're running in the fear mode. They're being told that people are going to die if they don't act on this, and their reaction is wrong. But ours has to be positive. And if they get overwhelmed, and if 10 people call and say, you need to lock down, you need to lock down, we need 100 people to call and say, look, you can't lock down the working well. We'll focus protection on those who need it. We'll help those who need it. We'll deliver food to those who can't come out. But you can't continue to do the harm to the individuals, to the loss of humanity, the loss of the dignity of being able to work and provide a living for yourself or your family, your loved ones. Those are all irreparable damages that are incurring to too many Albertans, and we need to say enough. And so what you really need to do is to get on the phone, send the emails, and even write a letter in order to let these politicians know that this province-wide lockdown is the wrong approach.
Yeah, and remember this, once your local businesses are bankrupt and gone, they're not coming back. You know, do you want to be in a situation where the only place that you can shop is Walmart or Amazon? This is absolutely insane. A lot of people have put their life savings and their life's work into building up these small businesses. You have to support your local businesses. And one of the ways you can support them the best, other than, of course, shopping with your local businesses, is to speak out on their behalf to the politicians before it's too late. You know, I know that a lot of them are right at the very edge of going out of business because of this second lockdown that Kenny has brought in. And interestingly, my local MLA, he wrote a letter to one of his constituents, and he said a few things against the lockdown. And what happened was it was publicized. So I guess he probably didn't know what to expect at that point. But reports that I've heard are that he had maybe a couple people, 3 or 4 people that got on his case for being against the lockdown, but hundreds of people wrote in to say that that's exactly what they support, and good for him for saying something. Now, he hasn't done enough, and these MLAs have not done nearly enough because we're in the situation that we're in. They should be telling Jason Kenney, especially, well, obviously not if they're NDP, but if they're a UCP MLA, until the lockdowns are lifted and until some recall legislation is passed, they should just be sitting as independents. And it won't take Jason Kenney very long to get the message if that starts to happen. So, of course, your local politicians are going to be the most responsive, but don't forget to hammer your local MLA. The UCP is reeling right now in the polls. Their numbers stink because they've absolutely bungled the job. Everyone was extremely everyone was really happy that the NDP was gone when Jason Kenney was elected a little over a year ago, and now here we are, where the people have completely lost faith in this government, and it looks like they're headed for almost oblivion, which is great for the Wild Rose Independence Party. But it's our priority isn't just supporting what happens with the party. We want Alberta to be successful, and this is not just about parties. This is about people's lives. This is about their whole society that we live in. We need this changed, and the quicker the better.
Yeah, we can't emphasize enough the importance of speaking out in whatever fashion you can, and then telling your friends that you've done it, and they should send it in. But David, if you have a few questions, maybe we can answer those last few questions before we sign off for the night. But we really appreciate everybody tuning in. But when are we going to start a petition for a referendum on equalization and on separation? Well, that's what the Wild Rose Independence Party is all about. I guess we're a working petition. Petitions, I've been in the legislature. I've actually, tabled petitions and whatnot. I've participated in rallies up there, and all of those are good. And again, especially if you can help voter ID. But the Wild Rose Independence Party is that petition. We're going to stop equalization. As soon as we get in there and form government, we will set up and create the Alberta Revenue Agency, and there won't be another dime that will go to Ottawa that we don't approve first, whether we want to support the military or intelligence or border control. But there will be no equalization with the Wild Rose Independence government. We'll hold the money, and like I say, we'll go through those federal programs and only support the ones we believe in. And it's just necessary because we're on life support. And the fact of the matter is, our Prime Minister, and again, many people are commenting about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, the Paris Accord, and our own Premier has said that he backs Aaron O'Toole and the Paris Accord and this great reset. And the only hope we have is to elect, in my opinion, a Wild Rose Independence government that will stand up for Albertans and Alberta industries, and that's how we can and will stop the equalization. But
I'll just briefly comment on that equalization referendum. So this is more game playing by Jason Kenney. I've talked to a huge number of Albertans, and there's just no question how a referendum on equalization will turn out. It's going to be over 90% against equalization. Sure, there might be a few people in Edmonton that vote NDP that think it's great, but in my town, you couldn't find 3 people that support equalization. So he already knows what's going to happen. This is just Jason Kenney's way to stretch things out so that nothing ever happens. And you know, even after this referendum on equalization occurs, well, for there to be a change in equalization, Quebec would have to agree with it. And of course, they're on the receiving end of $13 billion this year, and they have a surplus, and Alberta's got a $25 billion deficit, and yet we're giving money to them. So they're just not going to agree to that. So what Paul Hinman said is 100% correct. We need to start collecting our taxes here and with an Alberta Revenue Agency, and once that's done, then our money is not only going to be not funneled to buy votes in the rest of the country, but our money also won't be squandered all over the world. Billions of dollars are being spent on absolutely ridiculous programs across the world, and we're not going to put up with that. We're going to put an end to it immediately.
Yeah, and there's just no question that they want to shut down our oil and gas industry. They want to hurt us. They'll be going after the ranchers. Everything that we stand for, they're against, and we need to say no. But another question, David. How can you guys speak to mask exemptions for Alberta specifically? I'm referring to in public places like hospitals, clinics, and other public buildings rather than private businesses. Well, again, this goes back to our personal freedoms that are supposed to be guaranteed by our Constitution. And the fact that they've passed these mandates is very troubling. There's been lots of people that certainly that have medical conditions that there's no question that the masks are doing them harm. There's a few people that have got medical exemptions. And it's just been unbelievable, a couple of people that I've talked to, how they've been treated even when they have mask exemptions. And this is a classic example of paranoia, and where the intimidation and the fear mongering has worked and turning the public against one another. But again, all we can do is continue to speak out and to send the letters and the phone calls and to get this province-wide lockdown to end. You know, the 2 things that's been said so many times by so many people to me: if masks work, why are we having the spread? If isolation works, why do we continue to have the problem? And if distancing works, why do we have the problem? Well, none of them do work. And again, I found it almost comical to listen to the Premier last Monday when he says that, oh, we've discovered the problem. It's when people are in close proximity for 15 minutes that's when the virus is transferred. And so we just need to reduce that. And when you're passing somebody in Costco or Walmart, there's just a very, very slim chance that you're going to get the viral load necessary in order for you to become infected. And this just isn't the case. That's why it's spreading everywhere, is because that's what viruses do. And the isolation isn't working, the masks aren't working, but unfortunately the fear mongering is, and people are staying at home. But Paul, do you have any things you want to add to that?
there should be no need for mask exemptions because the mask mandates are based on a completely bogus narrative. The narrative is that, well, even though you might not think you're sick and you have no symptoms, if you go out into public, you could be killing someone's grandma. That's basically the narrative why everyone has to wear a mask and why businesses are only allowed to have 15% capacity or be completely closed if there's certain types of businesses. Well, what Jason Kenney and Dina Hinshaw will not tell you, and they will not admit to this, and it is very dishonest of them. There was one of the biggest studies ever done anywhere. 10 million people were studied for asymptomatic transmission. And what was found, it was very, very clear, only one person in 30,000 people had asymptomatic case of COVID-19. So first of all, there is almost no asymptomatic people, but they out of these 10 million people, they were able to find a few. And then those people had about 1,100 close contacts. So they thought, okay, well, we found a few people that have asymptomatic COVID-19. Let's see how many people they infected. And the answer was that out of the 1,100 people that were close contacts, there was 0 infections from these asymptomatic people. So the whole narrative is completely bogus. And this is why Dina Hinshaw and Jason Kenney should be ashamed of themselves. They're the fundamental underpinnings of their argument are false. There is not a situation where there's serious asymptomatic transmission. And of course, the cases that they always talk about are based on PCR testing, where the cutoff threshold is 35 cycles. And everyone knows that at 35 cycles, you get a ton of false positives. In a court case in Portugal, it was shown that at 35 cycles, only 3% of the positives were actually cases that were infectious, and 97% were not. So Jason Kenney himself on Danielle Smith admitted that he's known since September that up to 90% of the PCR positives could be false positives, and yet he's still carrying on with this game.
Okay, next question, David. Oh, is there any other than YouTube to watch? Are we not on Facebook as well?
Yeah, I think there we go. So yeah, you can watch on paulhinman.com, Facebook, YouTube.
Yep, links to YouTube and Facebook. So I hope that answers that question. Any more then, David? Well, I thought there was well, here we are. When we prepare for separation from Ottawa, we also need to ensure we leave the central bankers behind and go to gold standard like America is going to do under the second term of Trump. Are you on board with that game plan? Excellent question, Robert. And there's no question that the fiat money that's floating around the world and the monetary easing that's going on is creating a very scary scenario, far scarier than the virus and what it's doing. And again, I have to say that with Trudeau announcing that he wants to take advantage of this COVID for a great reset, he's escalating the problem, and so is our premier, by running these massive deficits. I have to say, they should be telling us what's the cost of all of these PCR testing that they're doing. What's the cost of shutting down so many businesses? There's just so many questions that we could ask on what and why they're doing this. And again, as an independent nation, I've been an advocate way back in 2000, 2003. I was speaking out. Premier Klein was building up that slush fund. And by the time we were at 2005, 2007, he had $17 billion of a slush fund that was for, they called it sustainability fund, but what it was a political slush fund to buy votes. And no, I think that a gold-backed currency, a silver currency, has a lot of merit. But I have to say, in this new world of digital money and with chain gosh, I can't believe I've forgotten the word, but blockchain technology, want to say it dyslexically. There's a lot of options out there. And again, we certainly won't want to be part of any federal bank where we're paying someone else to borrow the money. We'll create a monetary system that will serve Albertans and not the wealthy around the world or the World Bank or the IMF. And hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, I have a bit of an opinion on this. Fractional reserve banking is designed to create unlimited borrowing power for governments and, of course, unlimited spending. We need to rein in government, not give them an unlimited amount of rope with which to hang us. And so something like a gold standard or some sort of gold-backed currency in that it would prevent the unlimited spending of government. That's something that I personally would support, and the games that get played by the various international national banks, whether it's Federal Reserve in the United States or Bank of Canada or Bank of Japan, all of these other international banking cartel members, it is well, there's some very underhanded activities that go on with these banks, and I personally don't want to live in a country that is run by a bunch of bankers that operate behind closed doors and pull strings on the politicians. So I agree with the sentiment of the question, and I think if I have anything to say about it, then we will try and do something along those lines.
Oh, excellent. And again, I just want to add one of the things that I'm really big on, two things, and I'll say it over and over again, that our Constitution is really failing us on is one is accountability, and the other one is deficit spending. And we need a new Constitution where governments have to balance their books. And if they're 2% over, like a municipal government, taxes go up 2%. But I'd also like to see inside that Constitution a tax limit. And for me, the ideal one would be March 1st as a tax freedom day, meaning that no business, no individual, the cumulative tax couldn't go over 25%. Because of our deficit, maybe we need to go up to 33% in an April 1st tax freedom day. But
right now, tax freedom is June 9th.
Oh, is it that? I thought it was getting into July now, but I haven't looked at it for a while. And with the new deficits, you know that it's going to go up even more. But anyways, bottom line is that governments are notorious if they're not constrained on the money that they can spend. It's unlimited, and fractional banking is certainly a problem with that. And these countries that are in trouble, they go to the IMF and they start taking out loans, and they're happy to entrap them. But we can and we will do better. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. I see we've gone over the hour. I can't believe how fast the time goes. But anyways, thank you, everybody, and God bless you, and wish you well till the next episode. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.